I was invited to do a residency in Vietnam, and I was really interested in doing that because the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were going on, and I was sort of feeling like what had happened, and the reason that those wars were able to happen was that in some ways we as the American public, the US public, had sort of forgotten about Vietnam. And so when I was invited there, I thought this is a great opportunity for me to learn more about this because I feel like I don't really know that much about that history. And I was really interested in talking to local people about the Vietnam War. One of the first things I found out was that in Vietnam it's called the American War, which makes perfect sense and was sort of shocking to me that I didn't know that, or that we in the US aren't really that aware of that. The thing that I kept getting advised to do was to go to this museum that was in Ho Chi Minh City that's called the War Remnants Museum. And so this is the sort of the front courtyard of the museum where there are these actual remnants from the war, like helicopters and jets and tanks and bombs and things like that. And then on the interior, there's a couple of different sections, but the sort of main interior exhibition is a set of about 100 photographs and texts that go along with them that sort of explain that 10-year military involvement and then the aftermath of it. And so I'm going to show some of the photographs that are in there. And some of these images are very disturbing, so feel free to avert your eyes and not look at it if you don't want to. So it was interesting to me to look back and see this previous war in which there had actually been a lot of press coverage, and from different kinds of sources. So this was from Life magazine, like a photo series from Life magazine, published in '67. And Life magazine is a pretty mainstream magazine, but it had covered the war in this way. And so that was interesting. So the other thing that I was struck by was that a lot of these images were taken from U.S. magazines and newspapers and basically sort of like bootlegged. Like they rephotographed them from the newspaper or magazine. And then there were also photographs that were done by Vietnamese documentarians of the aftermath of the use of defoliants like Agent Orange on the environment, and then the effects of that on the population, which continues today with a really large number of birth defects that are visible in the streets of Ho Chi Minh City and all across Vietnam. So all of these things were really horrific to me to look at. And I'd seen some of these images before, but not in this kind of context. To sort of see something that had been constructed from the Vietnamese perspective, I went back several times, thought about it a lot, and then decided that it would probably be interesting if more people in the U.S. could see these images and see this museum. But of course it would be difficult to get them to go there, so I thought, why don't I just take the museum to the U.S.? And the way that I decided to do that was to basically like bootleg it one more time. And so I just, with a small digital camera, I just went through and photographed all of these images that I'm showing you, the photographs and the text for each of these, about 100 photographs. And then took that back to, I happened to be doing a residency at Art Pace in San Antonio pretty much immediately after that. So then I went to Art Pace, and I decided that, one, I should do a lot more research, so I started spending a lot of time at the San Antonio Public Library, reading everything I could get my hands on and watching all these documentary films. And then I was also organizing events where I'd have local people from San Antonio who had had experience with the Vietnam War come and talk to groups of people and talk to each other. So this was from one of those, and this was a person who was in the Marines at the end of the war. There were also like aid workers and protesters and immigrants and all sorts of other people, and we were having these like book reading groups to discuss aspects of that with different people. And I was also showing documentary films. This is from Hearts and Minds, a really good documentary about the Vietnam War. So then this is what the recreation looked like. I sort of just, it was in 2 rooms that were constructed for this, and were painted this sort of light blue, which was one of the colors that was used in the museum. And then I just sort of horizontally along the walls ordered the images that had come from the museum so that you would see the text and the photograph side by side. Okay, so this is a public art project that I was commissioned to do at Portland State, which is where I teach. And a train line went in, and they got public art funding to do artworks along the train line. And so I was commissioned to do something for this wall that's there on Portland State's campus. There was just a sort of blank wall. And I've always been really interested in books and libraries, and kind of in a way feel like that there's obviously like a less activity going on in libraries these days than there were when I was a student, and that more people are sort of using the internet for their research. And I, in a way, wanted to like direct people back to the library and the very nice library that we have at Portland State. So what I did was I sent out an email to pretty much everybody on campus. It's about 30,000 students and then faculty, and asked them to recommend books that they used in their research or studies, teaching at PSU that was available in the Portland State Library. And then I went and pulled out a selection of those books, photographed them, and then made a kind of photo mural that was then attached to the exterior of this building. So this is what it had looked like previously, and then this is what it looks like now with this these books. This is sort of like a recommended book list or something that's on the exterior of the building, and it's a permanent or semi-permanent piece that's still up there, and it has a plaque with everybody's name on it who contributed a book selection to the piece. Okay, this is a really recent project that I have started a new collaboration with two former graduate students of mine, Molly Sherman and Nolan Kalish. We are using the collaborative name Public Doors and Windows. So for this project, what we thought would be interesting is to insert into the museum environment a book fair. We're all people who like books a lot, and there's a lot of really interesting booksellers and book publishers in Portland. And so what we decided to do was create this book fair inside of the museum. And instead of having it concentrated the way that a normal book fair would be into one room, that we would have it sort of distributed across the museum, and it would be in different galleries so that it could be seen as sort of like an artwork within it. And then the other little twist that we added to it was that we commissioned sculpture majors from Portland State to construct the book fair stands in conjunction with the book publisher or seller. And so they would work with that person or that organization and construct what looked kind of like a sculpture to begin with, and was supposed to function in some ways as a sculpture, but also as a book fair table. And so this is one of them before the books were added to it, and then this is what it looked like once the books were added to it. And then over about a 3-day period, these people just sort of stayed there and with their books and sold books in the museum as well, and were able to sort of talk about the books that they published and sold in their various organizations. And so they were located in various parts of the museum, and all of these different sort of sculptural approaches that were done by these students. So it was a way of like integrating a larger number of students into the exhibition as well.